joining me today. I appreciate your time and your sharing.
Thank you, Craig. It's always a joy to interact with you and just to be in the presence together.
Awesome. So the first thought or question that comes to mind, David, that I'd like to ask is, what is non-duality?
Well, non-duality is a description of a state of mind, a state of consciousness or awareness of pure unification. So the illusion of opposites has disappeared and everything is unified. And so there are many different words we could use to describe it. In A Course in Miracles terms, it would be the happy dream or the real world or true perception, and maybe in other non-dualistic terms, it's like unified awareness. So it's being happy is what I think is the most basic way that for most people around the world, they can understand that word.
So it sounds like, or it feels like, really what is being expressed as non-duality is there's a direct experience that you're referring to, whether you use the words happiness and so forth. I think also sometimes the idea of non-duality comes to mind in terms of a philosophy or a theology. And so when we talk about non-duality as a philosophy or a theology, I myself, as a student of the Course or spirituality, whatever you want to call it, I sometimes see there's a perception of a different message that comes through, whether it be non-duality or A Course in Miracles, or perhaps even within non-duality, the non-dual teachers seem to be presenting saying different things. Can you just share a little bit about your thoughts and where that perception is coming from, and what's helpful to recognize as we listen to a lot of these non-dual teachers?
I think there's a word called discernment, which is really helpful in the sense that there seem to be stages that one goes through, but then there comes the state of purity where there are no contradictions. Nothing you think or say or do contradicts another word or another feeling. It's talking about an experience that's consistent. So we're not talking about just a glimpse. We're talking about a consistent experience. And non-duality, sometimes people talk about it historically as like monotheism, or that all is one. And there's a lot of great non-dual traditions in China and India. Of course, India, Advaita, Vedanta, and the Vedas are very, very well known. And basically, Advaita is not two. So we're back to oneness. But that actual experience of oneness would have to be pervasive throughout every seeming aspect of one's life, if that's an actual experience. So it wouldn't be something that you could just talk about as a theology. Just like happiness is something, if it dips into something that's unhappy, or sadness, envy, jealousy, rage, fear, guilt, those are emotions that really don't express oneness. Because if oneness is all there is, and love is oneness, then everything that comes from oneness would have to be an expression of that. So I think I've read a lot of non-duality literature like you, and I've enjoyed all the different terminologies of different teachers, and sometimes they'll talk about the Advaita shuffle, where the words are all trying to be very precisely non-dualistic, and there can almost be a dismissal of human experience that comes with that. And yet, what is the everyday living experience, moment by moment, day by day? That seems to be the most practical question. And therefore, that's the thing that is the ultimate decider, I think, or the ultimate discerner is, what is my experience? Am I happy? Am I experiencing happiness and joy and love and peace? Or is there something else, which would be, I would say, is just coming up for healing, coming up for release, because it still must be believed in for there to be some kind of emotion that's in there.
So I do have an experience that I want to share, or thought, or question to talk about, and it is this idea of choice, so, or decision making, or free will. And so I know that the Course, the message of the Course is ultimately that there is no ego, the ego is not real, and there is no separate self. That is what is being, I interpret, or being extended from the Course. That being said, there is sometimes the experience of a separate self making a decision. And so I'd like to hear from you how to best reconcile this ultimate truth that there is no choice, yet in the human experience there seems to be choice. So how does that get reconciled, and what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, to me, it's been a lifelong experience of how practical this is, in the sense that pure oneness and pure non-duality, the body would not long be maintained, because if there is perfect communication and everything is love and everything is one, there is no need of a body. And I was just reading in chapter 20 of A Course in Miracles, where Jesus says the body has no purpose. And that's very different than most of the Course, where he's saying that the sole responsibility, the sole purpose of the body is a communication device. He comes right out and he says, no, it has no purpose at all, because mind reaches to itself. It does not go out. Everything is within itself, you within it, and it within you. There is nothing else anywhere or ever. So everything is perfectly, we'll call it divine mind, because I know there's a lot of non-dual teachers that say you have to let go of the mind, or just live in your heart, and there's all these semantics. But what I have found is that to deny choice is delusional. When you're coming from a state where every day you experience yourself as a being making choices, to completely deny the concept of choice is complete delusional. You're just in a spiritual bypass. You're just trying to say the words, and if somebody would follow you around, like Gandhi always said, he'd say, "Follow me around. If you want to know what my religion is, just live with me. Follow me around, and you'll know by my state of mind what my religion is. It's not really a theology. It's a living experience." So what's good about what I'm sharing is that I wrote an article from a dialogue I had with students way back in the 1990s called "Purpose is the Only Choice," in which you do have to start to open up, to start to see that all the choices between the situations, circumstances, images really aren't going to give you a full experience of peace of mind, because you're still choosing between illusions or circumstances and images. But purpose is the only choice. So Jesus comes right out in his workbook and he says, heaven must take the form of a choice, because that's all you believe in. You believe in a world of opposites. And so heaven, even the experience of heaven, must take the form of choice, otherwise you won't be able to relate to it. It would be like somebody coming and saying, all power and glory is given you, and it's just sailing over your head, because you have no way whatsoever to relate to that power and glory and oneness. So it's very, very practical in the sense that all self-concepts that the ego has generated are involving choice. Even to be a spiritual teacher, or like in your movie Enlightenment or Bust, there was a lot of self-concepts that you were exploring as you went through that, and they were all involving Craig. And so at some point there's still not complete forgiveness, because Craig and David are still personal, and we have to be open to let that self-concept and that sense of personal choice get rinsed from our mind if we're going to know the happiness. God's will for me is perfect happiness, or know that will. So to me, it's been extremely practical, because that's where guidance comes in. And I notice in a lot of non-duality teachings, there's no talk of guidance. There's no talk of purpose. They may use the word intention, and I like that in the sense of talking about having a purified intention or coming to a pure heart. Those are all beautiful words, I think, that point to the same thing. But without the concept of choice, then it seems like the mind of many people who are working with non-dual and non-duality, they wonder, how is this practical? How does it relate to my everyday experience? What I find helpful about A Course in Miracles, because I studied non-dual paths, and I did quite a bit of traveling, and I've visited ashrams and many teachers, and it's always been an amazing experience for me. But the Course was like a how-to. It's almost like it has the same great wisdom that all the great non-dual teachings have, all the way back to the Upanishads and the Vedas and so on and so forth. But it actually has a system of practicality saying, here, I'll take you by the hand, here's your text, here's your workbook lessons, try to do them as best you can, don't do more than one, a day, and it gives you a lot of really great instructions, and then it takes you by the hand and literally leads you on a step-by-step awakening journey. And I'm big into practicality. I love to hear these words of truth spraying forth and emanating from so many teachers and so many traditions, and my heart just resonates and the heart chords are going. And also I like to see that everyone who's drawn into non-duality have a practical path. And maybe that's in following a teacher. For some, that's much more traditional Eastern spirituality, is you have a teacher or a master or a guru, and you just totally immerse together until there's no sense of separation, and it's glorious. And then the Course comes more as a self-study book for people that maybe are involved in a real hectic Western lifestyle, and they've got jobs and families and all kinds of issues going on, maybe with the environment or politics, and then it meets them right there in that seeming environment, and it says, here, just take my hand and here we go. We're going to go for it.
That's awesome. That's beautiful. I was thinking, as you were sharing, the thought came to mind about the Course, and you talked a little bit about how the choices seem to define the separate self-concept. So in Craig's experience, I went to college. This is what the choice to study this, the choice to be with this person, to whatever the choices are, it seemed to define the self-concept, and it seems like a lot of where we suffer is in the debate of whether or not I made the right choices or the wrong choices, all of which seem to define the self-concept. And then here you have the Course, which is basically saying to make the choice for heaven or to choose with the Holy Spirit, both of which are symbols of something that is definitionless. So it almost feels like, David, that the Course is training the mind to really make the choice to make no choice. Like, don't choose. Yeah. And in that non-choosing, you're also, I don't know if this is true, so you have to comment and tell me what your thoughts are, but it almost feels like in my seeming choice to not choose, I'm actually learning or becoming more accepting the definitionless sense of myself or identity, rather than choosing the constricted part of me that thinks that it's authoring life.
Yeah, I can totally feel that. I would add to that as you kind of come towards this point of seeing that there's nothing to choose between, that it's beautiful as you come towards that. I would say that seeming journey, which isn't really a journey at all, of time and space, but it's just a journey of awareness, we'll say. That seeming journey, I would say, is involuntary. So there is no one that is doing the doing. There is no one that is doing the choosing, which, of course, the non-dual teachers teach that all the time. So it's totally involuntary. But on a practical manner, I would say we can actually go into, while choice seems meaningful, while you still believe there's something to choose, what is that choice that you can put all your mind's energy into? And I would say it's a choice of purpose. Now, that's a term that people can say, well, that's very debatable then. So if I choose to live this kind of lifestyle or that lifestyle, does it matter at all? Does anything matter at all? And I would say at the level of mind or consciousness, that choice, while you still believe in it, it does matter. Because if you choose the Holy Spirit, it will have completely different set of outcomes emotionally and in every way than it would to choose the ego. So the choice between the spirit or the ego, I would say, is extremely important until you reach that point of seeing there's no choice at all. So then the next question someone may ask was, how do you tell the difference? What if one teacher is saying that's your ego and another is saying, no, that's the spirit. And they're talking about the same action or the same thing that you presented, and one teacher says it's ego, one says it's spirit. There has to be some kind of way of telling the difference. There is. If it's just purely as an emanation of divinity expressing itself using the symbols of words or smiles or laughter or hugs or whatever, then that is a transmission of divine communication, of spirit just communicating with everything, because spirit is unified, so it's just a unified expression of communication. If it's not, then what are the characteristics of that dastardly, deceiving purpose? Well, we have an awakened master that tells us that it's pride or pleasure and attack. You could do like a 2-week retreat on each one of those 3 aspects of the ego's purpose. For example, I will meet spiritual teachers all the time as I travel around the world, and they can talk the talk, but on the day-to-day living experience, maybe you could say there's still an attraction to pleasure. Maybe there's an attraction to a self-concept of being a spiritual teacher. How would you even know that except an offense? If someone seems offended by a person, a place, a thing, a circumstance, or whatever, then that offense, I would say, if you trace the offense down, I would say, aha, it could be pride that's at work there, using the guise of a spiritual teacher, but there's still a sense of wanting to draw recognition or draw attention, some kind of notoriety, some kind of notice, then that is the ego's purpose. And underneath that would be even the use of words or books or seminars, workshops. It wouldn't matter. The ego could still be sitting pretty and saying, aha, you're a person and you're a wise person, or you're a spiritual person, or on and on and on. You're a guru, you're an avatar, you're a saint, you're a mystic. You see how the ego can easily latch on with the words because the purpose is still being chosen. I would even use that word chosen. It's still being chosen, maybe not consciously, maybe not on the surface of consciousness, but underneath, it's still like, ha ha ha, I'm still going to be in charge here and I'm going to have a purpose. Or maybe it's physical and psychological pleasure where the mind is like, okay, all is one, all is love, all is God, and I'm attracted to this pleasure or that pleasure, and so on and so forth. I would say there's still choice active there, whether it's denied or not, it's still active because there's a sense of seeking for something that is a better experience than other experiences, which still shows that there's duality. I think the Course is amazing because it comes out and says it's impossible to seek for pleasure without finding pain. That to me indicates that there's still seeking going on. So if someone says, I'm not seeking anymore, the end of seeking has come, there is no seeker, there is no doer, oh, sounds good, sounds really good. But on the day-to-day experience, if there's still, oh, I still want to, I'm still unfulfilled, I would wonder what it'd be like to paint, or I wonder what it'd be like to do sculptures, or I wonder it'd be like to travel to Bali or to some place, that there's still like an incentive driving the mind, and you can say that there's no choice, but if there's something still driving you personally, then I would say that's still active. And then attack is quite common. I mean, I've been to a Course in Miracles community years ago where it was common people were being physically struck or thrown or hurled or so on and so forth. And all is one, all is love, all is God, all is atonement. Everyone's a master teacher, and yet they're physically throwing people around. And I thought, a good teacher never terrorizes his students. We learn from Jesus. So what's this physical stuff going on? I didn't really see Gandhi going around throwing people and everything. And he said, I'm not a master. This is Gandhi. He said, I've got a long way to go. I've got a lot of fear and guilt to deal with. But he still wasn't hurling anybody or like physically, striking anybody. I don't know. Maybe his wife would say different, but I know he got really upset with her one time when she wouldn't clean the latrine. But I never felt that he was like doing that. So you see, we're coming into practicality. That's where the rubber meets the road. That's where we really get down to the depth of non-duality, is actually coming down to purpose. And we don't have to be vague about it either. We can talk about pride, pleasure, and attack and say those are egoic purposes. So if the mind is attached to those purposes, regardless of the words it's saying, it's still not in an experience.
Would it be fair to say that perception isn't stabilized?
Yeah, that's a good way of saying it. That would be saying that regardless of the words, because the words coming out or the books being written or whatever, they're all at the ring of perception, but perception would not be stable if there's still this underlying choice of still choosing some aspect of duality, and certainly pleasure, pain, even pointing the finger and saying that's right and that's wrong, moralistic things that can come up, judgments. I would say that choice point you're talking about, where there's no choice at all, really, to see that there is nothing to choose, is a state of absolute non-judgment. And if it's absolute non-judgment, that must be total acceptance. It couldn't be anything but total acceptance. What would that mean? That would mean that any outcome, any event that would even seem to occur would be totally accepted as being perfect. In other words, all things work together for good. There are no exceptions. It would be that everything that I think and say and do teaches the universe, and everything is in total harmony. But I agree that if there's some sense of disharmony or there's some conflict, even a subtle conflict going on, then that is still involving judgment, and that's still involving choice.
It's interesting. It feels, David, as if there can be some kind of awareness or acknowledgement that there's like an awareness or an acknowledgement that there is no choice, yet still have the experience of choice. I guess what I'm trying to say is, like, it feels like there's an awareness and a part of me that recognizes that there is no choice, yet I was working on my website the other day, and I was going back and forth. Am I a course teacher? Am I not a course teacher? What am I? And so there's also the recognition that perception isn't stabilized in the sense that there's still, to what you were sharing, it still seems to happen where there still seems to be choices involved. So I guess what I'm saying, or what I'm asking is or that's all I'm saying. I don't know.
Yeah, when you're describing this awareness that there is no choice, I would say that that's a revelation. And a revelation, we're told in the Course, is showing you the end. It's showing you the complete end of everything. But it's described even in the Course as revelations are temporary, because whatever you call it, duality or choice, seems to come back into awareness, and then you're dealing with day-to-day things, with building a website or feeding the cows or the roosters or whatever goes on, and there seems to be a choice, like, well, what am I going to feed the roosters today, or what should I do during the next hour? So I would say that revelatory experiences give you a glimpse of that state of mind. And it doesn't matter whether it's an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience or just this flash that you have where everything is perfect and still for an instant. Or maybe it even seems like an instant, but it lasts in time for some minutes or hours or days. So I think we can acknowledge that revelation is there, and we can be grateful for it, but then we come back to practicalities. As long as there still seems to be something to deal with, then it's very practical to talk about, what is it for? What purpose does this serve? Am I trying to perpetuate a self-concept? Am I trying to perpetuate time? That's a real good one, because this whole linear construct seems to be about perpetuating linear time. And then when we have those aha moments where we don't seem to care at all, like the Chicago song, does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care about time? It's coming right through our popular songs, and we can all relate to that when that happens. So I think you're right that we have to acknowledge the glory of revelations, and yet we don't really rest content until it's a consistent experience. I think that's just pure honesty, self-honesty.
Yeah. So on the topic of non-duality, it's interesting because I've read an article that seems to suggest, or not seems to suggest, that directly suggests that A Course in Miracles is not a non-dual teaching, and that there's no mention of non-duality in A Course in Miracles, although I don't know if that's true or not, but the article seems to suggest that the word non-duality is not in the Course. My experience of working with the Course, that isn't the case. But I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I read an article like that probably over a decade ago, and I just thought, that is not my experience. Are we reading the same book? Because to me, it's the perennial wisdom. It's the perennial non-dual wisdom that I've read a number of them, and to me it's saying the same thing. Maybe it's because the practicalities are addressed and the whole book is written as if the separation occurred. So there's beautiful truths that come shining like jewels, like quite often. I mean, almost you could just say, as you go through every chapter, every workbook lesson, there are these jewels that are there. And so it never strays away from oneness and the teachings of that all is God, all is one, all is spirit, all is love. And yet it's such a good practical tool for undoing the ego and undoing the belief in the ego, that it has 365 workbook lessons. Well, there's 365 right there. And it has instructions with those workbook lessons. And so I would say that it is a non-dual teaching, no doubt in my mind, and it just has a lot of practical aspects to it that make it very, I think, useful for the mind that's asleep. It's not for everyone, and there are those that come right out and tell me, oh, I picked it up and I saw Christ and Holy Spirit and God, and I said, that's enough of that. I mean, some of those people will even come back to it months or years later and say, oh my God, this is so helpful. But if the mind has filters and has judged against those words, it will put the book on the shelf, throw it in the trash can, leave it in the river, because there's such a reaction to some misuse of some of those words. Like throughout Christianity, particularly in Europe, I think there's been such a misuse of the Christian symbols that when I go to Europe, people are burned out. They love to hear me talk about quantum physics. They love to hear me talk about the particle accelerator in CERN, Switzerland, and I'll do whole tours over there in Europe where I'll just talk about the God particle and the things that they're discovering in physics, and they love it. As soon as I mention the word Jesus or Holy Spirit, they're like, it's like their eyes go dazed and their smile turns into a frowning face instead, and the reactions are so intense. And I'll just say, let's go beyond the words. We can't let words stand between us.
That was my experience. I remember picking up the course and immediately saying, no, this is not for me. And then a few years later, picking it up again and having a different perspective or position on it, and feeling very joyful that I did pick it up that second time. I heard you in one of your talks, and this is, in my mind and in my experience, in hearing a lot of non-dual teachers and reading the books, etc., it's been beautiful for me to look at everywhere, or the way the mind is interpreting, accepting, and hearing these non-dual teachings. And I watched a video of yours, and basically one of the things that you expressed, which has really stuck with me and comes down to helps me discern, is basically, how do you feel? So it's like, if I'm, if I don't feel well, or if there's an experience of resistance or contraction, then this idea of no choice, this idea of no concepts, although that doesn't mean anything to me if what I'm feeling in the moment isn't happiness, isn't the oneness. And so this is where I think the Course has been very helpful, because what I want in those moments is the miracle. Even though the miracle is a concept, I'll take it when I'm not feeling well.
Yeah, that's true. I think that is really important, because if there is no world apart from the perceiver, if there is no subject-object split, which non-dual teachings teach that there isn't, then it means it's everything coming down to how I feel. It's very, very important. So if one feels fear, then you could say it's a fearful world. It's a fearful perception. If one feels happiness and joy, it's a happy joy world, because there is no world apart from the thinker or the perceiver. It's just the basic teachings of quantum physics that everything is unified, and if you're not experiencing that, then the split is in consciousness. It's not in the world. So that's beautiful too, to say I don't even have to go and try to work out something in the world to end this split, because it's never been in the world. There is no world apart from the mind that thought up the world. That's very, very deep and very profound, and but I think it's also very basic of how do I feel? How do I feel right now is actually a very important point, and that keeps it authentic. To me, that's what's authentic. I've even seen some long-term non-dual teachers that when the audience keeps pressing them and pressing and pressing them about suffering, for example, sometimes they just cave and go, okay, all right, there is suffering, and that, and right away, I have friends, they turn the video right off because we're looking for an experience that transcends duality. If suffering is real, pain is real, there is no God. If God is real, there is no pain. Oh, that's the most non-dual teaching that you could ever come across. But experientially, you have to face that. If there seems to be suffering, then you have to start to go, I want to pray. I want to open up. I want to ask to see this differently. I want to be shown. I want to be shown a new way. To me, that's humble. That's very, very humble. And the most humble is, I am as God created me. That's like acknowledging who you are is still who you are, and it hasn't changed. You still are as Source would have you be. The Source created you. So that's, to me, the ultimate of humility.
Yeah, I think even in that lesson, I don't know this for sure, but I believe in that lesson it says something like to accept that is the only choice, and even that's a seeming choice. I think the Course actually used the word seeming. But again, if that is, if we are feeling, if we're feeling anything but as God God created us, then why not use the belief in choice to get back on track?
Yeah. Exactly. The Spirit uses what the ego made, and that's another beautiful teaching. The Holy Spirit uses what the ego made. So the ego made up choice. So is all lost? No. There's still hope. The ego made special relationships that are designed to get instead of give. Is all hope lost? No. The Holy Spirit can use those. And the Holy Spirit would not take from you the little that you believe you have. I love that. It's almost like if the mind's kind of in a place of scarcity and gripping and holding on to things, like that Steve Martin movie years ago, The Jerk, where he's walking through this room, and I don't need anything, and I don't need anything at all, and I need nothing except, and then he's every 3 feet he's picking up more things, and then he still continues to walk through the room, and I don't need anything at all. I don't need anything except, and he keeps, it's like a parody, like a humorous look at the human condition that says one thing and then keeps reaching and keeps grabbing and keeps seeking and accumulating. So I find, it's just amazing. I watched a movie last night with the group here in Chapala called The Fountain. I don't know if you've ever seen The Fountain. It's an amazing graphic display of Hugh Jackman in relationship with this woman, and she seems to be dying, and she seems to be letting go very well of all thoughts and all concerns, and saying, I'm not afraid to die. She's just totally opening up to the love and the oneness that's beyond the body. And her husband, he's been her partner in other lifetimes too. It has flashbacks to other lifetimes where she's like this great queen and he's like a conquistador trying to please his queen. Well, he's trying to save her in this modern day life. He's a scientist. He's trying to find the cure, experimenting with monkeys to find the cure to save her personally with his medical breakthrough. And he's going through so much struggle. And it's just showing the letting go and the allowance and the accepting and the struggle to save a life, as if a person could save a life. It just shows it. And then finally, there's the most amazing transcendence scene, ascension scene, awakening scene, blazing light and lotus positions and lifting up into the light and a tree of life and all kinds of things. It's spectacular. So at the end of it, we had a great discussion because people were all like kind of dazed by it. And I said something that I said recently on a television show. I said, to see an apple as an apple is violent. And I explained what I meant, because that's a little more subtle than the typical things that we call violence. I explained that to see an apple as an apple is violent because to see an apple as an apple, you have to pull it out of the whole cosmos, of all the trillions and trillions of images, and you have to set it off by time and space, and then you give it a name, apple. And that's where the violence is. The violence isn't in bodies hacking up, shooting other bodies, not in bombs and explosives. It's to try to pull a part out of the whole. So to me, those are the deepest non-dual teachings, and it just allows yourself to spring into a state of wholeness and a state of acceptance. Like, I can't do that. I can't judge anything. I can't judge an apple as an apple even. Not that the apple is active or anything, but I can't even see something as separate. That's what I think all the non-dual teachers are pointing to. That's what I think all the great perennial wisdoms are pointing to. It's just wholeness, which you could call happiness or peace or the one, like in the Matrix. But I do think it's all pointing in the same direction. I really feel that.
Yeah, I do too. I do too, and I think that there's as I watch and interview different people for this series of non-duality, it really feels like, although the words spoken are differently, with a sense of humbleness, and I think that's my learning lesson, or that seems to be what I'm experiencing, is a sense of humbleness. And for me, all that really means is not to grab onto anything as truth. So this idea that there's no choice, to grab it and then say, okay, aha, that's it. There's no choice. Be willing to not do that, or to just kind of stand back for a moment and see what spirit would have me see from the larger scope or perception or perspective. Because every time I do grab on to an idea, even if it's in the Course too, if I grab onto one thing, I'm like, aha, I got it. I'm constantly being shown that I don't have it, and that isn't the end, and there isn't the truth, as you've said many times, isn't going to be in the words, but there's an experience that seems to, or an awareness that seems to kind of light up as I hear all these non-dual teachers, because there is a sameness that they're all pointing to, and that's where I seem to have fun and bask in.
Yeah, I love it. There's a friendliness with that humbleness. You can be very friendly and open. I think it's this thing about giving or getting. I mean, I find the joy of life is give, give, give. You're showing up to extend presence. That presence is not circumstance dependent. It's not dependent on certain words or certain terminologies. It's not really dependent on anything, and that's the joy of giving. It's like it's a wellspring that just bubbles up. And then at the end of the movie last night, I said, I'm going to use the word take, because the main character kept going to this tree of life, with this, always to take a little piece of bark and to put it in his mouth. It was almost like he knew he was guilty when he was taking. And then in the end, he had to let go of taking. He had to just give up taking. And that could be applied in many beautiful ways, In other words, you don't go to a spiritual teacher to take anything away from the teacher. You're not going to get something. The motive is not to get. And then suddenly you go, oh, that's so perfect. I feel so relaxed. I went to China one time, and I went to a couple different cities, and then I went down to this beautiful island called Hainan, and this man had followed me all the way down from Shanghai, an airplane flight of over 2 hours, and we got together with the group, and I just was happy and sharing and extending, and I said, oh, does anybody have any questions? And I opened it up, and this Chinese man said, well, I heard you speak in Shanghai, and I have to be honest with you, I didn't get anything from it at all. I didn't get anything at all from what you said. Now I've come all the way down to Hainan, and what do you have to say? And I said, you're not going to get anything from me here either. And the whole place just burst into laughter, roared and roared and roared, because it's truly our motive. If we're just in that giving, loving, extending mode, we feel amazing. It feels like heaven. It feels like nirvana. And as soon as we have a little hook where we want to get something from somebody, we feel we've paid money or we've traveled a long way or we've gone through whatever, and we're looking to get something, then we have an expectation. And we can say that expectations are not the truth. That there's nothing, there is no truth in any kind of expectation. It's very beautiful.
Thank you, David, for being a demonstration of that. It's beautiful. Even in this experience of whatever it is that I seem to be doing, it seems like Spirit has used or has shown me in some cases where the mind has been trying to get or take, and so forth. And it's just been really beautiful to witness and see that. I often think about, David, we look at the different teachers, right? You have different teachers, whether it be A Course in Miracles or Nonduality, and there seems to be, in some cases, an offer, to get something, and so it is, to, I don't know, find your romance, or to, find freedom in this, or get this, that. And in my experience, or in what I seem to be sharing in whatever way, I often have a thought, well, is there something that I'm offering? And then it quickly comes to mind that no, that's not the case. But there seems to be this back and forth of what seems to be appropriate or not appropriate. And even as I'm speaking right now, I can see that, okay, there's judgment there. So can you share a little bit about what's happening in the mind? Let's just look at that.
Yeah, I think as long as there is the belief that there's something to get from anything, then there really is no awareness of what a true offering would be. And who we are, our very identity as a beautiful, pure being of love and light, that is something that could be offered. Because even if we said as a metaphor, like we're just here as God's reps, as we're here representing Spirit, authentically it would be, we would have a state of mind of just love, and we would radiate that love. But it wouldn't have anything to do with getting anything. Because I really love that. I mean, I was named after David in the Psalms, in the Old Testament. And a lot of people know the 23rd Psalm. It starts out, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." What an amazing state of mind. If we just stop the 23rd Psalm right there at the first line, I just ponder that. I just like, oh my God. I just stop right there at the first line and I'm just stunned, because shall not want. So what would a state of mind be that was just so loving, so light, that it didn't want anything from anybody? That's what sets God, I would say, apart from the world of separation, because God is real and God is love and God extends love. That's how creation comes into being, or is what it is. But this is a world of scarcity and lack, and what have you done for me lately, and what are you going to offer? And it's almost like a back and forth bargaining that's going on. So I find that in order to really be happy and free, you have to be in that place where you don't want anything from anybody. That the giving takes over. because it's natural, and you can put stuff out, but you can't like try to extrapolate from that. Like sometimes people will write to me and they'll say, well, why charge money for anything? And I would say most people on the planet are just learning to clear out their guilt and let the spirit use the symbols of the world, and money is one of those symbols. So, putting a price tag on something or even saying suggest a donation or whatever, it's not evil, it's just a backdrop for learning the lesson that all is perfect, all is given. And so it's important not to interpret anything in form, like you said, in a final kind of way, not even to take a line from the Course or a line from a teacher or whatever and try to say that's the be-all, end-all, because it's way beyond the words. It's an actual loving, giving, flowing experience. There's even those 10 characteristics in the Manual for Teachers of a teacher of God, and the number 7 is generosity. And Jesus says that in the way that the world judges generosity, that true generosity is the exact opposite. When I first read that, I thought, well, that's a mind bender. I got to stop a minute. So the way the world judges generosity has nothing to do with generosity, and it's not only doesn't have anything to do with it, but it's the exact opposite. I thought, that's pretty extreme. I thought about like the great philanthropists, the Carnegies and the Ted Turners and Bill Gates and his wife and Zuckerberg, Facebook. I mean, he's just recently decided, that it's not good to have a lot of accumulated wealth, so he's going to start, giving it away or investing in things and so forth. And that's what the world would call philanthropy, and that's what the world would call generosity. Then I read number 7, and Jesus says, yeah, okay, now it's the exact opposite of that. And I'm like, oh my God. And that seems pretty generous, and tell me. And he says, the teacher of God does not want anything that he cannot give away. What would he want it for? He would only lose because of it. To me, now that's an invitation. Now that is a real invitation from Christ. And I'm thinking, wow, I want to live the Beatitudes. I want to be so in that attitude that I don't hold a thought of possessing anything, not possessing a body or a house or a car or a bank account or a teacher concept or anything. I want to be so in that true generosity that I don't want anything that I cannot give away. Well, what's the one thing that we can give away safely and not only give it away, but know it even more fully in our awareness is love. It seems to increase by being given away. Ideas increase by being given away. So to me, that's practical. To me, that's the only kind of invitation or offer that I can say is like, let's go into that together. Not that somebody owns it or that it can be even possessed, but can we join in that attitude of being so gracious and so loving? That to me seems realistic. That seems extremely practical.
So I do have one final question. As you look at the Course or think about the Course, is there a Course quote or a Course line that is exemplifies non-duality or points to non-duality? I mean, there's a lot of lines and a lot of things in there, but
Yeah.
What comes to mind for you right now?
Truth will be restored to your awareness by your desire, as it was lost by your desire for something else. So I think that to me that comes down to self-honesty of just, what is it that I want? And to me that's the pathway to enlightenment. The Bible, Jesus said, let thine eye be single. And to me, single is different than multiple. And single is different than dual. And I'm not talking about the forms and the images, but I am talking about the desire, the purification of desire. I think all spiritual traditions point to a purification. They may not call it single desire, But in the Course in Miracles, Jesus says our single desire is creation, and that's what we are. We are a creation. It's single, it's pure, it's unified, and it doesn't really have anything to do with this fragmented world. So I feel like that comes to mind very often when I even have anything before me. I'll say, what do I really want? What do I really want here?
Thank you so much. I love you, I adore you, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Chris.